Welcome, everyone, to this explainer. When you look at today's global news, you really don't just see isolated incidents anymore. What you're actually seeing is this fascinating, deeply interconnected web of shifting alliances and localized crises. Today, we're going to unpack these complex dynamics, connect the dots across continents, and show you exactly how high-stakes diplomacy, military posturing, and environmental pressures are completely reshaping our world in real time. Okay, let's dive into this and map out our geographic tour for today. We're going to start with the Middle East power shifts, move north to the Russia and Ukraine conflict, dive into the pressures inside India, examine Cuba's historic economic crisis, and finally, look at the violence against diaspora communities. First up, Middle East power shifts. Right now, the Middle East is seeing some incredibly high-stakes diplomatic and military posturing, pulling in global players from literally every direction. To really gauge the current temperature, just look at the immediate tension between the US and Iran. According to source reports, President Trump actually suspended a planned large-scale military attack on Iran. And surprisingly, this wasn't just an isolated US decision. It happened directly at the request of top Gulf leaders from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, who basically assured the US that a diplomatic agreement was within reach. Now, the US line remains firm. Iran absolutely must end its path to nuclear weapons. But Tehran's response has been equally unyielding. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has explicitly stated that, while they definitely believe in dialogue, there is no way they will surrender to pressure or step back from their legal rights. Now, what's really interesting about this number, 8,000, is what's happening behind the scenes of this diplomatic standoff. It represents a secret defense pact, where 8,000 Pakistani troops have been deployed to Saudi Arabia specifically to protect the capital, Riyadh, from potential Iranian threats. It's a pretty brilliant strategic maneuver when you think about it, especially since Pakistan has simultaneously been acting as a diplomatic mediator between Washington and Tehran. Let's break down exactly what this secret pact entails, because this is definitely not just some symbolic training mission. Alongside those 8,000 troops, Pakistan has deployed a truly formidable arsenal. We're talking JF-17 Thunder fighter jets, Chinese HQ-9 long-range air defense systems, and full squadrons of drones. And while the Saudi government is footing the bill for this massive deployment, the operational control remains entirely in the hands of the Pakistani military. Security analysts are noting that this dual role, acting as a public peace mediator while privately serving as Saudi Arabia's military shield, significantly boosts Pakistan's geopolitical leverage in the entire region. Meanwhile, just across the region near Cyprus, international waters became another flashpoint. Israeli naval forces intercepted the global Samud flotilla, which was a group of about 20 vessels carrying humanitarian aid bound for Gaza. During this operation, Israeli forces detained roughly 100 activists, including the sister of the Irish president. Now, the framing of this event is sharply divided. Turkey's foreign ministry strongly condemned the interception as an act of clear piracy in international waters, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the operation as a highly successful security measure that's necessary to keep Hamas isolated. Moving on to Section 2, the Russia and Ukraine conflict. This war is no longer just contained to its primary borders, folks. It's spilling over into the Black Sea and impacting unexpected global assets. In a really dramatic and highly sensitive escalation, a Russian Shahed drone struck a Chinese-owned Marshall Islands-flagged cargo ship called the KSL Diyang in the Black Sea near Odessa. All the crew members on board were Chinese nationals. What makes this incredibly tense is the timing. This strike happened right before a highly publicized, high-profile meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. And Ukrainian President Zelensky quickly pointed out that Russia would have known exactly which ships were in those waters at the time. That strike was actually part of a truly unprecedented exchange of drone warfare between the two nations. To put that into perspective, Ukraine executed a historic, record-breaking operation, launching over 1,300 long-range drones into Russian territory in just a single night. They successfully penetrated air defenses to hit central Moscow, oil refineries, and high-tech microchip plants. Then, in a devastating massive retaliation, Russia fired 524 drones and 22 ballistic and cruise missiles aimed directly at Ukrainian airspace. This barrage heavily damaged cities like Odessa and Dnipro, hitting residential buildings and kindergartens and injuring at least 26 people. The sheer scale of this exchange really illustrates a terrifying new intensity in modern drone warfare. Bringing our focus to South Asia now, Section 3, Pressures inside India. Right now, India is navigating a highly complex web of socio-political, diplomatic, and extreme environmental pressures all at once. So the crucial point here is the sudden, strict enforcement of an old law in West Bengal. Just ahead of the Islamic festival of Eid al-Adha, the new state government ordered the rigorous enforcement of a 1950 cattle slaughter law, and the rules are incredibly strict. The animal must be over 14 years old, you need explicit approval from local government representatives, and the slaughter can only happen in officially designated slaughterhouses. Absolutely no open spaces. Source reports indicate this is causing massive anxiety. Muslim communities are facing uncertainty for their religious festival, while Hindu cattle rearers and dairy farmers are equally worried about how this will severely disrupt their livelihoods and the broader agricultural economy. Adding to this localized tension in West Bengal is the number 2,500. The state government recently held its first cabinet meeting and made the controversial decision to halt state-funded monthly allowances for religious figures starting in June. This means stopping the 2,500 rupee monthly allowance for Islamic imams, as well as the 2,000 rupee monthly allowance that had been established for Hindu priests. And these internal domestic pressures are spilling over into India's international relations too. During Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the Netherlands, a rare diplomatic clash occurred. The Dutch Prime Minister, Rob Jetten, publicly expressed European concerns regarding India's democratic environment, the rule of law, and the rights of its minority communities, particularly Muslims. Well, the Indian Foreign Ministry immediately and forcefully rejected this. They countered that these concerns stem from a lack of accurate information, pointing out that since India's independence, its minority population has actually grown from 11% to over 20%. It's a demographic reality they argue proves India is a vibrant, inclusive democracy. Despite that, international scrutiny definitely continues, highlighted by the number 157. That is India's new ranking on the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index. They dropped to 157th out of 180 countries, which is lower than their previous rank of 151. But it's a fascinating duality, because during that very same trip to the Netherlands where these human rights debates occurred, India successfully secured some major historic bilateral deals, including a massive semiconductor manufacturing agreement between India's Tata Electronics and the Dutch tech giant ASML. And this brilliantly illustrates an entirely different yet equally crippling pressure facing India right now, an extreme environmental crisis. A severe heat wave has completely paralyzed the northern and central regions of the country. The capital, New Delhi, hit a suffocating 44 degrees Celsius, triggering an orange alert. But in the city of Prayagraj in Uttar Pradesh, the mercury skyrocketed to a life-threatening 46.8 degrees Celsius. The heat is literally so intense that local authorities are resorting to spraying water from trucks onto the streets just to cool the asphalt, as millions wait desperately for rain. Let's guide our focus across the globe to the Americas for Section 4, Cuba's historic economic crisis. Today, Cuba is facing what is arguably its most severe economic collapse in history, driven by a crippling lack of fuel from its ally Venezuela and the enduring weight of U.S. sanctions. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds, because you really can't understand Cuba's current isolation without this historical context. The rift began back in 1959 with Fidel Castro's socialist revolution, which led to the nationalization of U.S. businesses. By 1961, diplomatic ties were completely severed, culminating in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Just a year later, the whole world held its breath during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Fast forward decades to 2014, and President Obama initiated a historic thaw, attempting to melt that Cold War ice. However, the Cuban government didn't significantly liberalize its economy during that window. Then, the pendulum swung right back. In 2021, the Trump administration returned Cuba to the list of state sponsors of terrorism, reinstating harsh economic barriers that have left Havana completely economically stranded today. And that brings us to our final section, violence against diaspora communities. In this section, we're looking at a tragic global trend where macro-level economic and political instability translates directly into localized violence, profoundly affecting immigrant and diaspora populations. Down in South Africa, severe economic frustration and high unemployment have fueled violent anti-immigrant protests, largely organized under banners like Operation Doodle. The protesters are demanding local employment by actively targeting foreign-owned businesses. It's created an environment of sheer terror for documented and undocumented immigrants alike. Bangladeshi merchants, many of whom operate legal businesses there, have been severely impacted, facing physical assaults, vandalism, and the constant looming threat of looting. South African human rights organizations and the government itself are warning that this rising xenophobia is not only endangering lives, but also severely damaging the country's international standing. We're also seeing the tragic impact of localized violence in other parts of the world. In the US, source reports detail a horrifying shooting at an Islamic center complex in San Diego, California. The attack left 3 people dead, including a security guard. According to police, the 2 suspects, aged 17 and 19, were found dead nearby of apparent suicides, and the incident is being heavily investigated as a potential hate crime. Meanwhile, in Mersin, Turkey, another senseless tragedy unfolded when a 17-year-old opened fire in a restaurant, killing the owner, an employee, and 2 bystanders as he fled. Which brings us to our final thought for today. We've seen secret military pacts in the Middle East, completely unprecedented drone swarms in Europe, extreme legal and climate pressures in India, absolute economic collapse in Cuba, and devastating localized violence. As these global alliances shift and local pressures mount, how will these diverse flashpoints reshape the stability of our interconnected world tomorrow? It's a question we all need to be asking. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and absolutely stay curious about how all these global dots